The old soldier walked into the store expecting just a routine shopping trip. But when he saw the man behind the register, his posture, his eyes, he froze. Are you Delta Force?" he whispered. That look was unforgettable. 35 years had passed, but Richard Murphy still remembered it. In 1987, in the Middle East, in the desert, during the darkest moment of his life, he had seen those same eyes. Now, standing across from him in an ordinary grocery store, he saw the same gaze, the same composure, the same calculating intelligence, the same power. This can't be possible, he thought to himself. That man can't be here. He must be retired, maybe even dead by now. But his heart was racing, because he knew. The owner of this ordinary grocery store was anything but ordinary, and if he was right, the man standing before him was a member of the world's most elite military unit, a legend. Hello, and welcome to The Last Stand. Have you ever had an encounter in your life that completely changed you? Share that moment in the comments. In Pine Valley, Montana, everyone knew William Crawford. He was 71 years old, medium height, gray-haired, always dressed neatly. He'd been running Crawford's Market for 18 years, and nobody questioned his past. Bill, as he was called, opened his store at 6:00 a.m. every morning, never late. He was polite but distant with customers. Didn't talk much, just did his job. The townspeople had gotten used to it. His store was small but organized, everything in its place. Bill worked the same way, systematic, planned, never missing a detail. But Bill had unnoticed qualities. Every time a customer entered, he would size them up, just a glance, but he recorded everything, who, when, how they behaved. In the evenings when closing the store, he was very careful. He'd check all doors twice, test the alarm system. This was more than normal for a small-town grocer. And strangest of all, Bill never took vacations. For 18 years, he'd never closed the store. Sickness, snowstorms, nothing stopped him. That Tuesday was like any other. Bill was doing accounts at the register. When the door opened, he looked up. The man entering was in his 60s, walking with a slight limp. Richard Murphy was a retired soldier. He'd recently moved to Pine Valley. He'd just come to do some shopping. But when he saw Bill, he stopped. The man's posture, his eyes, the way he moved. It seemed familiar. Very familiar. "Good morning," Richard said, approaching. But his eyes never left Bill. Richard approached the register. He looked into Bill's eyes. That moment, everything changed. "You," Richard began, his voice trembling. "Are you Delta Force?" Bill froze. For 18 years, nobody had asked this question. Nobody had recognized him. "Why do you ask?" Bill said, no change in his voice. 1987, Richard said. "Syrian border. Rescue operation. You were there." Bill looked at Richard for a long time. Then he searched his memory. 1987. Syria. Rescue operation. And he remembered. "Richard Murphy," Bill said quietly. 100 and honest airborne. Pilot. "Yes," Richard said, his eyes filling with tears. "You saved me." In that moment, time seemed to stop in the store. Two old men weren't where they'd met 35 years ago that night, but spiritually, they were there. In late 1987, Richard Murphy was a helicopter pilot with the 101st Airborne. He was on a classified mission on the Syrian border. But everything had gone wrong. His helicopter had crashed. Richard was wounded. In enemy territory, alone, face to face with death. That's when he appeared. Like a shadow emerging from the darkness. Silent, deadly, but a savior for Richard. "You're wounded," the man had said. "I'm getting you out of here." That night was impossible. 50 kilometers of enemy territory, a wounded pilot, just one rescuer. But that man had done it. It took 3 nights. They'd gone through the heart of enemy territory. The man had carried Richard on his back, found hiding places, secured food. He never said his name. Just, "Call me Cobra." When they reached the safe zone, Cobra had vanished. Richard never saw him again, but he never forgot. Now, 35 years later, they were face to face in an ordinary grocery store in Pine Valley. "Cobra," Richard said, "your real name was William Crawford, Delta Force. Bill nodded. There was no point in hiding anymore. I've been here 18 years, Bill said. Nobody knows my past. Why? Richard asked. Why did you hide? Bill took a deep breath. He'd never told this story. 1,990 was my last mission, he said. In Africa, everything went wrong. My team, there were casualties. His eyes misted. 35 years had passed, but the pain was still fresh. They held me responsible. Wrongfully, but they did. Dishonorable discharge. Richard was shocked. This man, the hero who saved him, had been dishonorably discharged? I came here. Bill continued. New identity, quiet life. Far enough away to hurt nobody. But you're a hero, Richard said. You saved me. How many others did you save? Bill shrugged. That's in the past. Now I'm a grocer. But Richard wouldn't accept it. This man had suffered a great injustice. After Richard left the store that day, he began investigating. He called old friends. Used his Pentagon connections. What he learned shocked him. William Crawford really was Delta Force. 15 years of service from 1,975 1,990, 47 operations, 127 rescues. Perfect record. But the 1,990 operation in Somalia, there was a difference between official reports and reality. Richard investigated deeper. He spoke with old CIA friends, made contact with other soldiers who'd served in the Somali operation, and he learned. Bill was innocent. The failure in that operation was a high-level intelligence mistake, but they needed a scapegoat, and Bill was sacrificed. Worse, Bill's failure report was fake. In reality, he'd saved 12 civilians that night. Richard went to the Pentagon with this information. He spoke with former commanders. Made contact with military justice. This man has been wrongfully punished for 35 years, he said. Reopen the file. Initially, there was resistance. Old files, complex procedures. But Richard persisted. He presented evidence, found witnesses. Throughout this process, Bill knew nothing. Richard hadn't told him anything. He continued his normal life in the store, but Richard came every day. Shopping, chatting. Bill was slowly opening up. Why do you keep coming? Bill had asked one day. Because I owe you, Richard had said. You saved my life. 6 months later, Bill was having a normal day at the store. Richard had come as usual. They'd chatted. Bill now felt he was a friend. For the first time in 35 years, he knew someone truly knew him. When the phone rang, Bill expected nothing. Crawford Market, he said in his usual way. Sergeant William Crawford? Bill's breath caught. This was an official, military voice. Who's calling? Colonel Stevens, from the Pentagon. I need to speak with you urgently. Bill's legs trembled. A call from the Pentagon after 35 years. This could only be bad news. What? What do you want? Sergeant, please stay calm. I have good news. Good news? Bill's voice was barely audible. Yes, Sergeant, your file has been reviewed. The 1,990 court decision was wrong. We want to clear you and restore your honor. Bill dropped the phone. The sound of the phone hitting the floor echoed in the store. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He picked up the phone from the floor. This isn't possible. It's very possible, Sergeant, and we're very late with this. We're inviting you to Washington for an official honor restoration ceremony. Bill started crying. The pain, shame, anger he'd kept inside for 35 years. It was all pouring out. Sergeant, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Someone named Richard Murphy started this investigation. How grateful we are. Bill hung up the phone. He was going to call Richard immediately. When Richard answered, hello, Bill couldn't speak. Only his sobbing breath could be heard. Bill? Is that you? You did this. Bill, calm down. Yes, I did it, but you deserved it. 35 years. Bill's voice was trembling. I lived in shame for 35 years. I blamed myself. I couldn't sleep at night. I had nightmares. Why? Why did you do this for me? Because that night, you could have died for me. You risked your life to save me. This is nothing compared to that. Bill couldn't control himself anymore. He was crying in the middle of his store. 35 years of accumulated tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." When the news spread in Pine Valley, everyone was shocked. Their ordinary grocer, William Crawford, was actually a Delta Force veteran. Mrs. Johnson, Bill's longtime neighbor, was crying when she hugged him. "We never knew," she said. "You were always kind, humble. You never bragged, never mentioned." "I was ashamed," Bill said. "I thought I was a failure." "A failure? You're a hero, Bill. You're our hero." The townspeople started organizing an honor ceremony. This man had lived among them for 18 years, and nobody had known who he was. Richard went to Washington with Bill. On the plane, Bill was quiet. For the first time in 35 years, he was going to the Pentagon. "Are you scared?" Richard asked. "No," Bill said. "I'm not scared anymore." "You're with me." At the Pentagon entrance, Bill stopped. The last time he'd been here was in 1990 for the court-martial. That was the worst day of his life. "Ready?" Richard asked. Bill straightened up. He assumed his old soldier's posture. "Ready." In the Great Hall were more than 200 people: generals, colonels, Pentagon officials, media members. And in the front row sat Richard Murphy. When they saw Bill, everyone stood up. The applause lasted for minutes. General Harrison came to the podium. "We're here today because we're correcting an injustice. We're reversing a wrong decision made 35 years ago. William Crawford served in Delta Force from 1975 to 1990, 47 operations, 139 lives saved. Perfect record." Bill's eyes filled with tears. The last time he'd heard these things, it wasn't positive. In 1990, while serving in Somalia, he was subjected to a decision based on false information. "Today, we're canceling that decision." General Harrison continued. "Among the 12 civilians Sergeant Crawford saved that night were 3 children. This information wasn't in the reports." Because Sergeant Crawford never mentioned it, everyone in the hall listened quietly. This man was a humble, honorable, selfless soldier. And we wronged him. When Bill walked to the podium, his legs were trembling. But when he saw Richard smile, he found strength. General Harrison attached the medals one by one. "Distinguished Service Cross for your extraordinary heroism." Bill's hands were shaking. "Bronze Star for your courage on the battlefield." Tears were streaming from his eyes. "Purple Heart for your wounds and sacrifice." And finally, the general paused. "Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the highest peacetime service medal, for saving 139 lives." Bill had to speak at the podium. He stood before the microphone. "For 35 years I blamed myself," he said. His voice trembled but was clear. "Every night I thought about that operation. I asked myself what I did wrong, why my friends died and I lived." There was no sound in the hall. "Today I learned that my friends didn't die in vain. That night 12 people lived. 3 children went home." His voice broke. "That's enough for me. These medals aren't mine. They're for my friends who died that night." Standing applause began in the hall. It lasted for minutes. After the ceremony, when Bill was alone with Richard, he hugged him. "You gave me my life twice," he said. "How?" Richard asked. "Once in 1987, once today." Both were crying. "I can't go back to Pine Valley now." Bill said, "Everyone knows who I am. Why can't you go back? You're their hero. I'm not a hero, I just did my duty." "That's exactly why you're a real hero." When they returned to Pine Valley, there was a crowd at the airport. The whole town had come to welcome Bill. "Welcome home, hero," they shouted. Bill was surprised. He hadn't expected this much love. Mrs. Johnson hugged him. "You're our pride, Bill. You always were, but now we know. I'm still the same man." Bill said, "I'm still your grocer." "No," said the mayor. "Now you're Pine Valley's ambassador of heroism." When Bill returned to his store, everything had changed, but he hadn't. His first customer was an old customer. "Are you going to act like nothing happened?" she asked, laughing. "Of course," Bill said. "I'm still a grocer." But now, it was different. No shame, no guilt. For the first time in 35 years, he was at peace. Richard continued coming every day, not just for shopping anymore, but for friendship. If you enjoyed this powerful story, don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. William Crawford still lives in Pine Valley today. But he's not just a grocer anymore. He's the town's hero. And Richard Murphy? He still comes to the store every week. Because true friendship never ends. Sometimes justice comes late. But it comes.